Russia has not adhered to the agreement. This should have been done years ago. Until people come to their senses, we have more money than anybody else by far. We'll build it up until they come to their senses. When they do, then we'll all be smart and we'll all stop. And by the way, not only stop, we'll reduce, which I would love to do. But right now, they have not adhered to the agreement.
Well, to sum it up, hope everybody's in the mood for an expensive arms race with our former Cold War adversaries. On Saturday, the president announced the U.S. intends to pull out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, a 1987 arms control agreement with the Soviets signed by Ronald Reagan. Trump's comments came as National Security Advisor John Bolton prepares to meet with Putin tomorrow. They're also expected to talk about Russia's interference in the 2016 election. You'll want to hear this. Speaking to a Russian radio station today, Bolton downplayed the impact of that interference. He said, quote, "The point I made to Russian colleagues today was that I didn't think whatever they had done in terms of meddling in the 2016 election, that they had any effect on it. But what they have had effect on in the United States is to sow enormous distrust of Russia." A lot to talk about there. I could almost not talk about it. Still with us, Greg Miller and Jeremy Bash. Greg's latest book, by the way, relevant to this conversation, The Apprentice, Trump, Russia, and the Subversion of American Democracy. So let me start with Jeremy with a dual question. And Jeremy, it seems to me the thesis of my question is the old-fashioned nature of stewardship and the presidency. Number one, what about an arms race? What about casting aside this treaty? And number two, the feds just warned us last week of Russian attempts to meddle in our upcoming midterms. Where's the stewardship over the American people and their safety?
Well, first, Donald Trump loves nuclear weapons. He campaigned on building up our nuclear arsenal. He actually asked Defense Secretary Jim Mattis to build some 30,000 nuclear weapons, even though he only maintained 2,000. And doing so would not only bankrupt us, but destabilize the world. Other than that, it was a great idea, Brian. It was obviously rejected by the Joint Chiefs and by the SecDef. And here he is again walking away from arms control and trying to trigger another arms race, because I think, honestly, nuclear weapons makes Donald Trump feel tough. But in fact, it won't make us safer. And there are other ways to counter Russia's use of land-based weapons and also to counter China's stockpiling of intermediate-range weapons. On the issue about John Bolton, I'll just say very quickly that, of course, what he's doing is he's giving a green light to the Russians to continue to meddle, to attack our elections, I should say. They're doing so in 2018, as the Justice Department just indicted somebody for. And this is shameful because it undermines not only our intelligence, but our collective defense. Greg
Miller, none of this makes sense if you know anything about Bolton and his history. He's a neocon. He's a veteran hawk. Your book about this period and this topic reads like a novel. You know what the next chapter is going to be because we all lived it, and yet you can't wait to get there because of the pace and what you learn. So what do you think is up here?
Well, I think that this is just sort of the latest example of the sort of contortion that you have to go through as a national security official and the sort of core beliefs you have to set aside to be able to be part of this administration and to work with this president. I mean, Bolton's entire history is as a Russia hawk, and yet here he has to, make gestures toward Russia to be able to work with Trump. He's the one who sets up the summit in Helsinki for Trump. Of course, his predecessor, H.R. McMaster, had tried to put that off and avoid and try to prevent that from happening. And now, Bolton has to mount this argument that Russia's interference really didn't hurt Hillary Clinton or help Donald Trump's chances, which is, the core belief that you have to work this closely into this White House to this president. And everything we've learned suggests that that's just not true. For one, U.S. intelligence agencies specifically did not look at that question because it's not part of their mission. It's not part of their job. But the data that Facebook has looked through and that Twitter has looked through has shown that more than 125 million Americans were exposed to Russian propaganda denigrating Hillary Clinton and propping up Donald Trump in 2016. And this is in a race that came down to fewer than 80,000 votes. The math just becomes overwhelming.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.